Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski, and this is the podcast where we talk about the way that the built environment impacts our health, our wellness, our productivity, our general joy of being alive. And of course, we always have to talk about sustainable design. I have an interesting episode today. We're going to go somewhere we haven't gone before. I have Toby Witte from Wittehaus, an architect from North Carolina. He focuses exclusively on energy efficient, sustainable, and healthy luxury homes. Toby, hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure having you here. Let's start by getting to know you. We want everybody to know who you are. Tell us a little bit about your background, but Toby, make sure that you emphasize the path that led you to the founding of Wittehaus.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. Well, I come with a funny accent. I was raised in Germany and got to become a draftsperson over there, which is a long process. 3 years. I worked in a firm while going to school. And along the line, I fell madly in love with my wife, who is from the States. So after we lived in Hamburg for a minute, we moved here to North Carolina. And I studied at the UNC in Charlotte, studied architecture. And so when I got here, I was already completely on fire. I lived, breathed, and everything about architecture that there was possibly to find for me. I had read every single book that was on the syllabus. I had the books dog-eared by the time I studied architecture here in the States. And I fell essentially out of school right into a firm I founded back then with a buddy of mine that I since have sold. And yes, about 8 years ago or so, I opened Wittehaus and completely focused, like you said, on energy efficient, modern luxury homes in the Carolinas, the East Coast, if you will. So yeah, that's sort of the short of it.
Yeah, that's a really cool start. I want to get right into this. I want to go right into this, Toby. If I had been in your shoes in 2017, I'd been worried that there aren't enough people who can afford luxury homes and who also want a highly sustainable home. How did you know that the market was there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so when we first gave it a shot, it was a good 20 years ago. And we were just talking, nobody had any idea of what we were talking about. But we stuck with it, and slowly but surely the market changed around us. And we were just simply too stupid back then to do anything different. But now the market has changed. The energy efficient part is a no-brainer anymore. I firmly believe that in a decade or so, if the home you live in is not high performance, it will be very hard to sell. And so the landscape simply has changed. And then on top of that, folks are moving here from primarily the West Coast and up north as well. So a lot of people from California, New York, and those areas essentially moving here. And so the market has changed drastically. And then I should also say that luxury, so I explain that in my book, Supersizing Bliss, that for me, so everybody has a different kind of set of parameters by which they measure their own luxury. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean, whatever, everything has to be gold plated, but rather that one concentrates on those issues of living, of the built environment that is important to them. And so that they put their emphasis and concentration on those aspects and dive in fully. And so that might be different for each inhabitant.
Yeah, okay. That's a really cool explanation, a very logical explanation. I like that a lot. Let's talk about the details of what makes a home, what makes a sustainable luxury home. And let's talk about the two simultaneously. What are the factors that make a home both sustainable and luxurious?
Yes, so I think Those are essentially two sides here of the same sort of approach. When you design a house with sustainable measures at mind, you simply create a better home, a home of higher quality. And so, specifically on the sustainable part, I think, and I should say that it's still kind of talked about as if it is a difficult set of issues to approach, or that it is very expensive to build your home high performance. And rather, it isn't. It's quite simple. And there's very cost efficient, straightforward means by which to make a house way more sustainable. And so, specifically, one is to create a continuous insulation shell around the entire livable area, and then continuous air barrier around the entire area. A builder I work with here calls it, think of it like a Yeti cooler, essentially, around your living space. Then there is just a simple design measures by orienting your house towards the south with overhangs so that you have the lower winter sun come in and heat your home when you need it, and keep it out because of the overhangs during the summer. So it's very straightforward design to the site, as simple as that. And then lastly, or thirdly, you can simply install solar panels on your roof when you're all set and done, which at this point, we're at an inflection point. Right now, you can essentially have solar panels on your roof for free. And I think we're at a point where it's going to flip, where you essentially have your own energy company factory on your roof and making money on it. And so those are three straightforward, simple means. They're no-brainers. Also, some of them tested over time, as not rocket science, is easily available. But just by focusing on those few things, there's other things, of course, too. But just focusing on those, you create essentially a livable environment that is much more healthy, much more comfortable to live in. And so straight from the get-go, increases the luxury of your lifestyle.
Do you want to bring lots of healthy, beautiful natural light in your building and still meet energy codes? Try Solera from Advanced Glazings. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Right on. I like that. Okay, let's talk about your process a little bit. I looked at your website. It says that you support the homeowner through the entire process. Can you tell us, Toby, what exactly does that look like? How closely do you get involved during the construction phase?
Yeah, so I think that it is actually the sort of number one concern and service we bring to our clients, to take them by their hand and guide them through the process from front to back. For them, it is in most cases, once in a lifetime experience, and they invest their life savings. And so we don't take that lightly and want to make sure that they dive into it and with their eyes wide open and understanding what the decision points are. And then we bring them along each step of the way and introduce them to each next step. And so at the beginning, there's a lot of information sharing. We help them find a property. During the design process, we introduce them to a builder, for instance, or an interior designer if they are needed, amongst many other specialists we bring on board. And so then we are there doing the construction, and then even moving in, helping with moving companies, and then even life organization at the very end. And so we try to be there and at the very beginning, painting the whole picture, answering the questions, tell them the hard truth. It's going to be more expensive than you think. It's going to take longer than you think. You get to do what you want to do. Let's have some fun. And then make that whole process easy. The best feedback we get when our clients tell us that they enjoy the process, that is a wonderful adventure for them, that they're happy not only when they move in, but while the house is being created.
Now, we talked before we started this recording. You actually were essentially a carpenter at one point, right? You actually, as part of your growing and learning process, you swung a hammer and, became an actual carpenter. Is that correct?
Something like it. Certainly in Germany, I worked on construction sites, and during my apprenticeship, I had to work on construction sites as well. But then here in the States, at the beginning, like 20 years ago, we couldn't find general contractors who could execute what we were designing. And so then we were forced. So I have a general contractor's license now, built maybe a half dozen homes or so. Not enough to make a professional living out of it, but enough to understand the process and to understand what the builders that we work with, what their pressure points are, what their problems are, to understand how the subs work, what they need, and then design towards those sensitivities, and so that it becomes a wonderful project all around. And I've learned in the past that when everybody is elevated and excited about the project and get to bring their expertise to the project, then the projects turn out so much better. It's always, without fail, we work with new subs through the general contractors we work with, and often at the beginning they're a little question our motives and what are you asking me to do here, jumping through what hoops. By the end, they, with no kidding, they actually bring their families at the end and show them proudly what they had worked on. And so so it has been fun to be involved in the construction like that. And it's still, I think, understanding the construction itself brings richness to the design, because we can then understand, each time can learn new aspects, new details, improve our expertise, and find solutions that are actually that can execute for a reasonable cost.
I love that. Yeah, you clearly demonstrate that knowledge, which results in some respect from your subs, from your contractors, and that creates a much better relationship, I would think, right from the beginning. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. And then what's just fascinating, so essentially in my book, Supersizing Bliss, I kind of paint the landscape of the single family home in the United States, why we build those things, and why, in the way we do, and how are ways to make it actually better. And part of the sort of problem that I see in the landscape is that actually the attention does not lie in the quality of the design space. And with it, essentially comes the fact that the craft that is available, the expertise that is out there by the subcontractors, is not tapped into. And so when we get to actually show up and say, no, I want to know how you would execute it, how you would execute it better. I want to learn from you so that our projects become better and better. Then everybody shows up with a caring eye and a loving hand, and the project turns out 10 times better. And there's so much knowledge out there that is just incredible that we have sort of thrown to the wayside. I think a while ago, talking about energy efficiency, energy was so dirt cheap that what we actually do, we build cardboard boxes and throw in a heating and cooling system and don't care what it costs to run it or what it costs to the environment. And, we heat and cool our front yards. And instead, we should design and build homes that are actually meant to be lived in, that are meant to, work with the environment. The expertise is there from all of the people that are involved. And all we have to do is tap into that and say, you teach us how to do it right, and then let's do it. It's as simple as that.
I'm going to go off script a little bit here, Toby. You'd mentioned your time back in Germany. So have you learned anything, is there anything that you've brought from Europe? Europe is clearly leads North America in terms of moving towards more sustainable design, or historically that's been the case. Have there been specific techniques that you've brought back from Europe that are valuable to your American customers?
Well, one thing I can point out, I guess, is in the title of my book, Supersizing Bliss. Because what I essentially argue is that smaller can be better. And that's certainly a mindset I brought from Germany, where there's simply not as much space as here in the States. And so things are designed, in smaller ways to make it fit. But my point is, I like to share the story of the school bus. You can buy a school bus for the same price as you can buy a Maserati, the same sticker price. But of course, you get more square feet with the school bus. And so if you translate that into the real estate market here, what's being sold, what's being financed, what's being okayed in neighborhoods, it's the school bus, because you get more square feet for your buck, same sticker price. Um,
Right.
but it doesn't matter whether you actually need this big, rattling tin can, or, two-seater that you want to enjoy the ride with. And so what I'm trying to make exactly that point is, like, we can actually create a much more spacious feeling home, a much more luxurious home, a home that has built in better quality, that is mindful of the environment, this is sustainable, high performance, lower energy cost to run. We can do all of that for the exact same sticker price if we are okay of letting go of the bowling alley or rooms and square feet that nobody is using. And so that might be one thing I brought with me. Some of my clients have made fun of me of providing too small of closets for them, for instance. So I've
Right.
learned to make sure there's enough room for closet. So I'm learning, to kind of balance that understanding out. One other thing that has been fascinating to me, I've noticed flying back to Germany, that seems like every single house has solar panels on their roof. And that's, I mean, such a straightforward, easy way to add a huge bit of sustainability to your house. And again, at this point, it's essentially free. The cost of installing solar panels will increase your mortgage payment at the rate that your energy bills are reduced. So essentially, it's free at this point.
Oh, that is just fantastic and good news. That really great to hear that. And yeah, I look forward to the day when we're seeing more solar panels on houses in North America. Well, let's talk about light. I always like to talk about sunlight for sure. Tell me what role natural light plays in your designs. Is it important for you and for your clients to bring natural light into the homes?
Yes. So it's huge. And all of my designs offer, big areas of glass. What, of course, has to happen, is the quality of the glass. That is, of course, a given. And you ask why the glass, I guess, and the windows. So tying into what I said earlier, so we orient those windows to the south. It's the best light from just an emotional quality. It just warms up the house. It's just gorgeous. And light, natural light from the other direction doesn't do the same thing. It's just warm, happy. It's just a wonderful light. In addition, like I mentioned before, we can actually handle it in terms of solar gain. And so I like to talk about it's like a baseball cap essentially, right? That you shade your eyes with when the sun is beating down and you try to cool the house. But then again, the lower sun in the winter can come in under those overhangs. And so we essentially orient each design. That's the first question. Where's the south? How do we meet our views and privacy concern with that direction? And how can we capture that light in a meaningful way into the space that wants it? And also it ties into that less is more. When to kind of simplify it, let's say all you need is a couch to be comfortable to sit on that doesn't need many square feet. It's a fallacy to think that we have to put that couch in 800,000 square foot for it to be in a meaningful space that doesn't feel claustrophobic. But all we have to do instead is provide the square feet for the couch, maybe a little for your feet you can stretch out. But then at that moment, if you connect that space to the exterior, to the nature, if you essentially remove the walls, and so that the space doesn't stop at the baseboard in front of you, but stops at the horizon beyond the windows, then all of that exterior space is part of the space that you experience. And so it requires the windows, but it requires that the windows are of a good quality, and it means that they are also integrated into the design in a way that it actually makes sense and works for the high performance. And I mean, I've seen so many times, there's a lot of lakes around here, and people like to build their homes on the lake with a view of the lake. And I've walked into so many homes where that big view is oriented to the west or to the east. It's bombarded by the morning or afternoon sun, and they have essentially their blinds closed in front of that view. And so all of that reason that they bought this property for an extra, little bit of cash is null and void, is unusable because it's just simply not designed around the window and the sun.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. I mean, and beyond the glare, like the solar heat gain in the
Yes.
southeast can be, it could be punishing
Yeah.
in the summertime. Obviously, that's something that's very conscious in your design, and do your clients ask for as well or speak about?
Yeah, so most of them don't know, and why would they? That's what we're here for. And so we certainly take the time to guide them through these concerns and appreciations. And so so that when they move in, they know. And then they tell us their experience. Just recently, so there's a house under construction that we have here in North Carolina on Baden Lake. And same story there. It's actually a lake house oriented to the lake. We designed it in a way that is also with the big windows of the living space facing south. And it has these gorgeous overhangs incorporated in the design. You don't even know what's going on. Already doing construction, the proof was there. Our clients were talking about the need of having window treatments because they were afraid of their furniture, of their wood flooring and all of that to be discoloring essentially by the sunlight. With all this glass, Toby, in our home, it's going to ruin everything. We need window treatments. Well, during the construction already, I could show them as the construction was going on, the shadow line outside, where that lies, and it's in front of the window, and showing to them, look, inside is a beautiful, warm, bright light, but it's not direct light. The direct sun stops here, in the middle of August, right there before the window. And so your furniture, your wood flooring, none of that gets affected while you still live in a beautiful, wide open space. So yes, it's something that is simply, we educate and try to share and, guide our clients through.
I love that. All right, let's talk about, I'm going to use the term conspicuous green. And that comes from, I stole that term from Prof at UNC Charlotte, Blaine Brownell. Did you work with Blaine or did you stumble across Blaine?
He's the director of the School of Architecture.
Yeah.
He came on board after I was there, but I've met him several times, and he and I are actually going to talk on a conference in Asheville here in a few weeks.
Oh,
Or in
right on.
months or so.
Okay. Tell them I said hello.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this conspicuous green. Do you like to show off the green elements of your design, or are you just trying to blend those into the home so that the home looks conventional?
Yeah, so it's more the second, I guess. I don't, and it's part of or the way I look at this is, yes, it's not a big deal. And I cringe when sustainable measures are being presented as something complicated and different and, it's important on its own right. The way I look at it simply means you design a better home. There's no other alternative. If you don't design and build your home in an energy efficient way, why bother? I mean, it can be baked in. And so it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be, certainly, if somebody wants to celebrate certain aspects, I'm happy to. There's, of course, no doubt about that. But it doesn't have to be. I mean, you just simply build your home with in a better quality and you benefit from it. And so it doesn't have to be anything that is celebrated visually, let's say, but rather just enjoyed viscerally by just the benefits it brings. So a great example is, for instance, crawl spaces. Essentially all homes in this area have an awful air quality. They sit over crawl spaces, the unfinished basement under your floorboards, let's call it, where a lot of moisture, mold, gases from the ground seep into the house and provide you with a awful air quality. On top of that, our homes leak, and so our air heating and cooling systems are inefficient, and so it's loud. It goes up and down in temperature all day, especially in extreme times like the summer right now or in the winter. They fight moisture control in the air to a degree that's ridiculous. And so it creates just an awful living environment, while the opposite is easily done. We can simply, as I mentioned before, if we have a continuous insulation shell, windows being a huge part of it, and air tightness all around. You're balancing out all of that. You have next to perfect air quality, and your air conditioning system works half as much. It can be much more better size, lower size. It's much more even. Best thing comments we get, clients of ours say, Toby, you can't hear our air conditioning system. We don't even understand whether it turns on or not because it's quiet. It just barely works in the background because the quality of the air and the moisture content and everything is already, in a really good state. So I think, that's sort of how I look at it.
Yeah, so sustainable design just becomes a modern home.
Yeah.
Right. I like it. I like that. And speaking of which, your homes have a very modern aesthetic. Do you think that style is better suited to sustainable design, or is it just that you and your clients like that aesthetic?
Yeah, it's just that I like it. I have more fun with it. I mean, I think sustainable design, it doesn't matter what the end product looks like, but I certainly enjoy. I say our designs are modern simply because it kind of opens a conversation in a certain way and puts us in a certain direction. But really, the way I look at it, it allows us to be. I want to be playful in our designs. I want to be able to be free and design a house towards the homeowners, their memories, their ideas of living, what they bring to the table, so that for them it's a perfect, beautiful living environment that has the potential of enriching their lives. And so by not having to follow any certain sort of design look or style or some sort of that, we just get to dive in and have fun and be creative and try out different building materials, different way of arranging the spaces, different way of arranging structure and materials and building pieces that create spaces in a way that is much more refreshing, playful, intriguing, fun. So that's how I look at it. And so, yeah, we call it modern or contemporary, but really it's just free and fun.
I like that. You mentioned materials. I'm going to jump on that for just a second, Toby. Are there any exciting materials that you've stumbled across recently that you like to incorporate into your design?
All the time. One that has been really interesting and fun, unfortunately a little technical, but so concrete alone worldwide is responsible for 8% of all CO2 gases emitted into our atmosphere. 8%, just concrete. That's, mind-boggling. And the atmosphere is our shield to the outer atmosphere. It's about this thin.
Right.
And, it's a barrier between our living environment and the endless outer space. And we are shooting, just by using concrete, we're shooting 8% of all of the CO2 gases. It comes from concrete. It's mind-boggling to me. And of course, that's all construction. And so here in the Carolinas, we are able to use carbon capture concrete, which essentially takes carbon from smokestacks and incorporates it into the concrete. And so you buy back some of the sins, essentially, of using the concrete in the first place. And it's a remarkable, better product because of it, the concrete is. And so that has been wonderful to use, lowers our anxieties and conscience. But in general, the materials are changing drastically. So many new things are being tried out, and some of them slowly make it into the built environment and readily available. Certainly, and that's sort of the question. There's a lot of fun stuff out there, but they're one-offs and cost a lot. And so the question is, we can use that if you're interested, but what are the means by which we can do all of this without necessarily increasing the price tremendously? And so one product that it's out of North Carolina, I want to say, that has hit the market in the building industry are the zip boards, the green. So if you see a house, the listeners out here, that if you have seen a house being framed and it's green before the siding goes on, that's most likely the zip panels, and that's essentially has an air barrier baked into it. And if you want to, a layer of insulation, and so that layer then goes on the outside of the studs, and so it provides for a continuous insulation layer and a continuous air barrier. And so it's a perfectly available product. Framers, so the framers is no different. It's the same framing material that they're used to, except it does more. And so we love to look for those kind of products. And yeah, I mean, with the windows, and you can tell more about that than I can, but certainly there's such wonderful products like yours out there that just increase the effectiveness of the windows and allows us to use them. And so those materials are simple to order, simple to use. There's no brainers. They improve the living environment. We love those products.
Introducing Solera Reserve from Advanced Glazings, making luxury homes even more beautiful and more healthy using cool, controlled natural light. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the carbon capture concrete. I mean, and they're kind of in the same place that we are in with Solera for, it's been, I won't say commonplace, but it's been used regularly in commercial applications for some time now, but it's relatively recent that it's making its way into the residential market. And we're in the same place with our light diffusing glass for daylighting and for high levels of insulation. We've been in the commercial world for 25 years, very spotty in residential, but now it's becoming a much more significant force in the world of residential. And really, we didn't do anything different. It just took, a little bit of time for the crossover into the residential market. So yeah, it's perfectly analogous to what you described there. Let's talk about net zero. I mean, that's obviously a goal for you guys. Do your homeowner customers, do they ask for net zero, or is it something that you have to, explain to them and promote to them?
Yeah, so we are now at the point where it's essentially default.
Okay.
And we already just talked about the equation for it. Design and build your house better so your energy bill is lower, and then
Yep.
capture the remaining energy usage through solar panels. End of story. And
Yeah.
for our homeowners, that is, of course, a wonderful, even if they don't come with asking for it right out, then they are immediately convinced that that's the way to move forward. And so it's a default now for us. And at the very least, what we do is create the first part to design a house better and have it energy efficient, and then have the solar panel as an add-on option. So it's prepped for it. The house is designed with surfaces to the south where we can install the panels, but that they can also decide to do it at a later point, and so it becomes essentially net zero ready, if you will. But even at that point, even if they don't move forward with the solar panels, the house is already so much more energy efficient and the energy bills are so much lower. It's incredible. The Hearst index is one of the maybe most successful sort of measure or scales by which to measure the energy efficiency of a house. And it essentially says, well, how does your house compare with all the other homes built in the United States? And just even without the solar panels installed, the houses turn out so much better and energy efficient by just simply designing it right and building it right before we even then install the solar panels. But again, for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. It will be a fact that if you live in a house in a decade and a half from now and it's not energy efficient, you'll have a hard time selling it. It's just simply the right way, the only way to do it. And so for us, it has become that. And so our clients love us for it. And like anything else, it's a scale that we get to move. How crazy do you want to go with this? How little? What is your sort of pocketbook look like? Where do you like to, place your budget and your life earnings? And we discuss it and find the right measure, a position for that lever to rest on. And so it's a fun, extra, wonderful bonus that our clients get to experience.
Right. I like that, Toby. That's spot on. Let's talk about regenerative design. Do you consider regenerative design or circular economies at all when you're designing a home?
Well, what do you mean specifically with
Sure, yeah. So they're going to renovate the kitchen in 10 or 15 years. They're going to renovate the bathroom in 10 or 15 years. Do you design those spaces in such a way that things are easily removed to minimize material waste and possibly to be reused in other applications? Is that part of your thought process in the design?
Yes. So I would say that so many things in the building industry and in the single family residence world is kind of following trends and fads. and they die out quickly. And so like our mantra is, if you like red right now, maybe don't tile your bathroom all in red, but buy a red towel and floor mat, let's say, right? So you can actually change as things changes in an easy manner. And so what we
Right.
try to do is that where our houses have a timeless aesthetic to it that can stand, the change of time and also change with the inhabitants' life. And so that, for instance, several of our homes have spaces that can serve as a guest suite, as an Airbnb unit, as the mother-in-law suite or something they used to call it for a minute, in-law suite or something,
In-laws, yeah.
or granny suite, I think. Or something.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the difference is between an in-law
uh,
suite and a granny suite, but maybe
So,
they're the
but
same.
those spaces are just simply ways for the house to be able to change without you having to put any, hammer on a nail to make the changes. So that's firstly what we do. But we do recognize that some things, kitchens, appliances, fixtures, certain things, they do want to be exchanged over time as things change. And so we certainly try to consider that our designs are not that complicated to grow and change over time, that we have that in mind, certainly. And the materials we use when we can, we certainly love using recycled materials. We use, for instance, aged weathered wood for siding outside. We recycle often. We have recycled even the trees that we had to cut out. So usually we are very selective of prepping a site and cutting trees only where we need to minimize the building site. And then we have you reuse those trees for furniture and such inside the house, recycled brick and all kinds of stuff. We're certainly mindful of that and have fun with it. I think there's also simply a certain, which comes to the timeless aesthetic, there's a certain richness we try to find in the texture of the material, through the texture of materials. And aged, weathered material can bring a great counterpoint to new materials in a home. And so when the brick is recycled or the wood is aged or items like that, it just brings a texture to the house, a timelessness, a richness, a sort of depth to it that is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've reached the point in the show where I ask my $1 million question. I ask every single guest the same question, and I ask that you answer it from whatever perspective you'd like. So here goes, Toby. What makes a great building?
Yes. So my point is that if a building or a space does not strive to lift your soul, what's the point? I think that the built environment has an incredible influence of how we meet the day, how we understand ourselves, what our life, how it sort of colors itself around us. And I think that it is most important for us to create inspiring spaces that have the ability to bring happiness to your life. I was lucky enough to design and build a home for my family and I, and we have moved in 8 years ago. And kid you not, it still feels like a vacation when we're here. Every time we enter here, we leave our worries and stress behind and feel good about ourselves. It's a wonderful place to be. And I think that our built environment, the buildings and spaces we create have to provide it. It's not enough to build a shelter. It has to be of a quality that enriches our lives.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure. My family and I we didn't design the home, but we bought a 140-year-old farmhouse in a valley on a river. And it's the feeling of entering that home or just being in that home. It just completely changes your mindset. It changes your attitude. It just makes you comfortable and relaxed. I'm sure there's some neuroscientists or neuroarchitects who could explain to me why I'm feeling the way I feel. But I certainly know that because the home is so I don't know, you feel relaxed in that sort of environment in a home. That I don't ever feel bad about touching anything or moving something. It just, the home just says everything is fine, everything is okay. It gives me that freedom of living the way I want to live. I just absolutely love it, and I'd love to hear you designing a new home for your family that gives a similar sort of relaxation to your people.
Yes, I love that. That's exactly, I mean, I couldn't put it any better than you just did. That's exactly why this whole effort should be for, and that's why what I consider the luxury we talked about earlier, I think it's exactly that. And we owe it to ourselves to do it right and place the attention and the time and an effort on that. It's not about square feet. It's not about zip code evaluations. None of that matters. That happiness and joy of being is what matters, and we should put our effort and attention to that. And like we just talked about, the sustainable part is just another piece of that to create exactly that.
I love it. Okay, Toby, do you have any exciting news that you'd like to share? Anything that you want to promote? Let's make sure you mention your book again, and let's make sure you tell us your website too.
Yeah, the Supersizing Bliss is the book, and there's a website of the same name, and you can certainly get a copy there, but it's available anywhere where books are available. And yes, as I mentioned, I essentially talk about what we just talked about in our conversation here, and I share essentially ways to do it right in a hopefully fun way. It's written for my customers, clients, for the non-architects, as a way to just open my world to them and bring it closer and make it accessible for them. So hopefully it's a fun read for most folks. So yeah, that's certainly love to share that. Yeah, I would say that's probably the best piece. There's a podcast with it as well. I offer a lot of fun, silly, short videos on YouTube as well. I'm talking about all of these things we talked about today and many other things. Yeah, good things to check out.
I got your book on Amazon. It's available
Ooh.
on Amazon for sure. So anybody looking for it, it's as simple as that. And your website URL is witteha.us, right?
That's right. Try to be sustainable even with the URL. As little resources as possible.
Perfect.
Yes.
I love it. Toby, thank you so much. What a wonderful conversation. It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate it, Joe. Thank you so much.
All right. You take care.
You too.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.